The pipes either needed replacing or they didn't. That was the thing about plumbing. It didn't care what day it was, what you had planned, or whether you'd slept 4 hours or 8. It just leaked or it didn't. I'd been under the crawlspace of a century-old Victorian on Maple Street in Westmount since 7 in the morning. It was November, which in Montreal means the ground is cold enough that your knees start aching before the first coffee wears off. I had a flashlight in my teeth, a wrench in my right hand, and about 6 inches of clearance between my face and a pipe that had been slowly dying since probably the Mulroney years. My name is Cal. I'm 31 years old. I own a small plumbing and renovation company, 3 vans, 4 guys including me, and more work than we can always handle because old houses in this city are endless, and they all have the same problems. I didn't plan to end up here. I had 2 years of engineering at McGill before the money ran out, and my dad's business partner offered me an apprenticeship. That was 8 years ago. Now I know more about what's underneath the floors of this city than I probably know about anything else. I don't say that to complain. I say it because it matters for what happened next. I heard heels on hardwood before I heard her voice. Click, click, pause. Click, click, pause. The kind of walk that meant someone was navigating an unfamiliar space carefully, not used to being in rooms that smelled like old insulation and rust. Hello? The voice came from the top of the crawlspace hatch. Is someone down there? I shifted the flashlight out of my mouth. Yeah, give me a minute. I heard her exhale, not quite impatient, but close. I finished tightening the coupling, let the pressure equalize, and then backed out of the crawlspace the way you back out of anywhere uncomfortable. Slowly, without any dignity. When I stood up, there was a woman standing in the doorway of the basement, holding a leather portfolio against her chest like a shield. She was maybe 28, maybe 30. Dark coat, hair pulled back tight. The kind of put together that takes effort and doesn't advertise it. She looked at me. The coveralls, the dirt on my forearms, the flashlight I was still holding. You're Cal Brennan? Last time I checked. My name is Willa Ashford. She said it the way people say things they expect to land. It didn't land because I didn't know who she was. She seemed to register that. My family owns this building. I know, I said. I've been doing the plumbing inspection for the estate sale. Your brother arranged it. My brother arranged a lot of things. Her voice had an edge to it I didn't understand yet. Can we talk? Upstairs. I only have about 40 minutes. I looked at my watch, then at the hatch, then at her. Let me wash my hands, I said. She had the kitchen table cleared by the time I came in from the sink in the mudroom. Her portfolio was open, and she'd arranged some papers in a row that looked official, the kind with letterhead and small text and signature lines at the bottom. She didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask for any. I'll be direct, she said. That'd be helpful. My father passed away 6 weeks ago, heart attack. He was 61. She said it flat, the way people say things they've had to repeat too many times. He left the estate, this house, the commercial property on St. Catherine, and shares in Ashford Holdings, to be divided between myself and my brother Dominic. But there's a condition in the will. She paused. There's a clause. My grandfather put it in the original family trust in 1987, and my father never removed it. What kind of clause? She looked at me steadily. The kind that says a female heir must be married or engaged with a date set within 90 days of inheritance, or her portion reverts to the male heir. I sat with that for a second. That's, I said, extremely 1987. Yes, the corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile. It is. And before you ask, I've had 3 lawyers look at it. It was drafted by someone who knew what they were doing. It's airtight. Okay, I have 43 days left. She looked at the papers. Dominic knows about the clause. He's been waiting. She said the word like it tasted bad. He's not a bad person, but he wants the company. He's always wanted the company, and right now the company is worth about $4 million, and my share of it is supposed to be half. I looked at the papers, then at her. Why are you telling me this? She folded her hands on the table. Because I need someone to be engaged to me for 43 days. Specifically, I need someone who can be present at a board meeting on December 14th, where I'll be formally ratifying my inheritance. There will be people there who know my family. It needs to be credible. She paused. And I need someone who has absolutely nothing to do with the Ashford family, their lawyers, their circles, or my brother's contacts. Someone completely outside of all of it. I looked at the table. The old pine surface, the water rings from decades of coffee cups, the small crack along one edge that I'd noticed when I first came in. "And you picked your plumber," I said. "I picked someone my brother would never think to look for." She met my eyes. "And someone who I had a reason to contact without it looking unusual. That was actually smart." I gave her that. "What does this involve?" I said. "One dinner with my aunt and her husband in Westmount before the board meeting. The board meeting itself, about 3 hours. Possibly a follow-up conversation with the family's notary. And for 43 days, if anyone asks, we've been seeing each other for 3 months. Quietly, because that's the kind of person I am. Are you? The quiet kind." She looked at me. "I'm the kind of person who planned for everything except my father dying early and a clause from 1987 making my inheritance conditional on my marital status." She paused. "So no, not always." I leaned back in my chair. I want to explain what was going through my head, because from the outside I can see how this sounds insane. It was insane. A woman I'd never met was sitting at a dead man's kitchen table, asking me to pretend to be her fiancé so she could inherit half her family's company. The sane thing, the obvious thing, was to say, "Thank you, get up, finish my inspection report, send my invoice and go home." I thought about my dad. He'd worked 30 years as an electrician, and when his partner retired, there was nothing to pass on. No equity, no company, no assets, just tools in a truck. He was 64 now and still taking jobs. I thought about what it felt like to watch someone who built something their whole life have nothing to show for it structurally, nothing that would outlast them. Then I thought about what it would feel like to have something and have a piece of paper from 1987 take it away. "What are you offering?" I said. She'd been ready for this. She pulled one of the papers forward. $25,000, she said. 15 on the day we agree. 10 after the December 14th meeting. I looked at the paper. It was a simple agreement, dates, terms, a confidentiality clause, termination conditions. "That's a lot of money," I said. "It's a fraction of what I'd lose." She said it without heat. "And I want someone who'll do this because it's a fair deal, not because they're desperate. Desperate people improvise badly." I looked at her. "You've thought about this a lot," I said. "I've had 6 weeks of not sleeping," she said. "So yes." I sat there another minute. I thought about my partner, Kevin, who'd been after me to buy new equipment for 2 years, and I kept putting it off. I thought about the lease on our shop that was coming up for renewal in March. I thought about the way she'd said waiting when she talked about her brother, the word and the expression that came with it. "I have one condition," I said. "What condition?" "At the dinner with your aunt. At the board meeting. I need to know the real version of how we met. Not a cover story, the actual version, adjusted enough to be plausible. I won't lie well enough if I don't have something true to build from." She studied me. "Why?" "Because I've told exactly 2 lies in my adult life, and both of them fell apart within 20 minutes. I'm a terrible liar. But I can tell the truth in a way that sounds like more than it is, that I can do." Something shifted in her face. Not the controlled, prepared expression she'd been wearing since I came up from the Crawlspace. Something more like recognition. "We met because you were inspecting my father's house," she said slowly. "Because I came in while you were here. Because I asked you to sit down and talk. And then we kept talking." "That's exactly what happened," I said. "We just moved the timeline back 3 months." She looked at the table for a moment, then she held out her hand. I shook it. Her grip was firm. She didn't look away. "There's one more thing," she said after. "Of course there is." "I'm not." She stopped. Started again. "This is I want you to know that. I know that. I'm not going to pretend it's something else, and I'm not going to ask you to either." I thought about what to say to that. "Willa," I said. It was the first time I'd used her name. She noticed it. "I replaced a water heater for a guy last year who cried the whole time because his wife had just left. I've sat in a lot of kitchens with people who are having one of the worst periods of their life. I know what this is. You don't have to protect me from the shape of it." She was quiet for a second. "Okay," she said. Then she picked up her pen, signed her name on the agreement, and pushed it toward me. I signed mine. The dinner with her aunt was 2 weeks later, in a house in Westmount that had a wine cellar and a kitchen bigger than my entire apartment. The aunt's name was Rosalind. Her husband was Jeffrey, a retried cardiologist who had the handshake of someone who'd been shaking hands in important rooms for 40 years. Rosalind looked at me for approximately 4 seconds before making up her mind about something. I don't know what she decided exactly, but she stopped looking at me with assessment and started looking at me with something that was either warmth or politeness executed very well. With some people you can't tell. Willa tells us you met at the house, she said, over the salad. That's right, I said. I was doing the inspection. She came in while I was still there. And you asked her to stay for coffee? Rosalind looked at Willa. He asked me if I wanted to sit down, Willa said. I'd driven 2 hours from Ottawa. I sat down. That was true. She'd actually told me that on the drive over. That she'd driven from Ottawa the morning we met because she hadn't told her assistant where she was going and didn't want a record of it. And what do you do, Cal? Jeffrey asked. It was the politely loaded version of the question. The version that means, and are you someone? I own a plumbing and renovation company, I said. Brennan and Sons, though there are no sons. It was my dad's name for the truck when it was just him. I kept it. Rosalind smiled at that. Jeffrey nodded in the way people nod when they're recalibrating. How long have you been in the trades? He asked. 8 years running my own company. Before that, 2 years of engineering at McGill. Why did you leave engineering? Money ran out, I said. And an opportunity came up. I don't regret it. I know what's under the floor of this city better than most engineers do. Jeffrey actually laughed at that. It surprised both of us. Rosalind looked at Willa across the table. I don't know what she saw, but she reached over and poured more wine into Willa's glass without being asked, the way you do for someone you're glad to see. On the drive home, Willa was quiet for about 15 minutes. Then she said, Jeffrey laughed. Yeah, I said. He doesn't laugh. He's laughed maybe 4 times at a dinner in the 12 years I've known him. I wasn't trying to be funny. I know, she said. That's why it worked. We didn't say much else. But when she got out of the car in front of her building on Avenue des Pins, she paused with her hand on the door. Thank you, she said. Not the transactional version. Something else. Good night, Willa, I said. She went inside. The thing about pretending to be in a relationship is that it requires you to actually know someone. You can't fake the details, the texture of it, the small specific things that make it real to other people. So over those 43 days, we talked. Not constantly, but regularly. She texted me about work sometimes, not asking for anything, just the way you text someone when something happened and you want to put it into words before it disappears. I'd respond from wherever I was, under someone's sink, in my truck between jobs, once from the waiting room at Arona because we needed fittings that weren't at the supply house. She was a corporate litigator. She worked at a firm in Ottawa and had for 7 years. She was good at it. I could tell not from the way she said it, but from the way she talked around it. The way people talk about work they actually understand. She had a sister who lived in Vancouver and a mother who'd moved to Victoria after the divorce when Willa was 14. She hadn't told her mother about the clause in the will because her mother would spend the energy being angry on her behalf rather than useful. And Willa didn't have space for that right now. She'd told her sister. Her sister had said, Are you sure this guy isn't going to be weird about it? And Willa had said, He has a contract and he signed it in my dead father's kitchen. I think that sets a pretty clear tone. I told her that story. She'd left out the word dead when she told me about it. I appreciated that she'd put it back in. She asked me once, about 3 weeks in, if I'd ever been close to getting married. We were on the phone. I was on my couch and my dog Juno, a gray shepherd mix who'd showed up at my building one winter and left, was asleep with his head on my feet. Once, I said, about 4 years ago. Her name was Brooke. What happened? She got a position at a hospital in Edmonton. She wanted me to come. I didn't want to leave, and I told myself it was because of the company, but honestly, I think I just wasn't brave enough to start over somewhere I didn't know anyone. Do you regret it? I looked at Juno's back rising and falling. I regret how I handled the conversation, I said. The ending was probably right. She was quiet for a second. I've never been close, she said. There was someone for about 2 years, but I think we were together because we were in the same industry, and it was convenient. When the convenience stopped, there wasn't much underneath it. What stopped the convenience? He got a job in Toronto. He asked me to think about the long game. She paused. I told him the long game looked fine from Ottawa. I laughed. She did too. A real laugh, slightly surprised at herself. That was terrible of me, she said. Probably, I agreed. But it's a good line. The night before the board meeting, she called me at 10:30. I need to tell you something, she said. Okay. Dominic knows something is off. He doesn't know about you specifically, but his lawyer made a comment yesterday that it wasn't incidental. He's going to be looking for something wrong tomorrow. I sat up. Juno moved off the bed with the air of someone greatly inconvenienced. What are they going to ask? I don't know exactly. The standard questions probably. How we met. How long. Whether the engagement is formal. There's technically no requirement in the clause for an engagement ring, but if they ask whether we've set a date, tell them spring, I said. Late May. You haven't booked anything because you wanted to wait until after the inheritance was settled. Silence. That's very specific, she said. May is believable. It gives you room to plan. It's not so far that it sounds like you're delaying, and it's not so soon that it sounds panicked. I paused. Also, I do actually like late May. The city's good in late May, she exhaled. Cal, she said. Yeah, she stopped. I keep forgetting this is temporary, not in a delusional way. She paused again. You're the only person, in 6 weeks, who I've been able to talk to about any of this, without them either getting emotional or asking me how I'm holding up. Do you know how exhausting it is when people ask how you're holding up? I imagine it's the worst, I said. It is, she said. It really is. I thought about what to say. Get some sleep, I said. You know this material better than anyone in that room. I'll be there at 9:15. 9, she said. Please. 9, I said. Good night, Willa. Good night, Cal. The board meeting was on the 14th floor of a glass tower on McGill College, 12 people around a long table, most of them older than me, most of them wearing the kind of clothes that were chosen to communicate something. Dominic was across the table. He looked like an older version of what Willa might have looked like if things had gone differently. Same sharp features, same watchful quality. But where hers looked like precision, his looked like calculation. It's a subtle difference, and I can't fully explain it except to say I recognized it. He looked at me once, at the start, and then didn't look at me again. That was its own kind of message. The notary read the relevant sections of the will. Willa's lawyer presented the documentation, our signed and witnessed engagement statement, the dates, the notarized affidavit. Everything Willa had prepared with the kind of thoroughness that comes from being very good at your job and also being terrified. Dominic's lawyer asked to speak. We have a few questions for due diligence, he said. Smooth. Academic. The tone of someone who'd prepared this the way you prepare a closing argument. He looked at me. Mr. Brennan, you and Ms. Ashford have been in a relationship since August. Is that correct? Since August, I said. Yes. How did you meet? Through work. I was conducting an inspection at the family property on Maple Street. Willa came in while I was still there. Did you know who she was? The Ashford family? I looked at him steadily. I knew who owned the building. I didn't know Willa, and the relationship developed. How? Quickly, I let a second pass before answering. Not defensively, just letting the questions settle. Not quickly, no, I said. We talked that first day for about 2 hours. She called me 3 days later about the inspection report. We ended up talking for another hour. It wasn't quick. It was. I looked at Willa, because that felt like the right thing to do, and she was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her before. It felt like running into someone who speaks the same language. That doesn't happen fast, but when it happens, you know. The room was quiet. Dominic's lawyer made a note. You're a plumber, he said. Not quite a question. Plumber and contractor, I said. I own Brennan & Sons. We've been operating for 8 years. He nodded, writing. And the engagement, there's no ring? She doesn't wear rings to work, I said. She's in courtrooms 4 days a week. We agreed she'd choose something after December when she's not carrying this. I paused. That was my idea, not hers. I didn't want her wearing something she picked under pressure. That was true. I'd actually said that to her, as a line to use if asked. But sitting there, I realized I'd meant it. Dominic's lawyer looked at his notes. He asked 3 more questions, standard things. The dates lined up. I didn't waver, because I wasn't lying. I was telling the truth at a slightly different angle, the way I'd said I would. At 11:40, the notary called a brief recess. Willa leaned toward me and said quietly, You said running into someone who speaks the same language. Yeah, I said. That's not from our notes. No, I said. It's not. She looked at the table for a moment. Then the notary came back in and everything continued. At 1:15 it was over. The inheritance was ratified. Dominic stood, shook hands around the room, and left without looking at either of us. His lawyer followed. Willa thanked her team in the hallway. She shook hands with the notary. She signed the final papers with her hands steady. When the last person left, we were standing by the elevator bank. With the city spread out beyond the windows, December gray, the mountain just visible through the cloud. She said, "You can have the second check by end of week." "I know," I said. She looked at the city. "What you said in there," she said. "About speaking the same language." "Willa, I'm not." She turned to look at me. "I'm not asking you for anything. I just want to know if you meant it." I thought about 43 days of text messages from job sites and late-night calls and a woman laughing at herself in the dark and then sounding surprised that she could. "I meant it," I said. She was quiet. "The clause is satisfied," she said finally. "There's no requirement anymore. You're free." "I know," I said. The elevator opened. Neither of us moved. "I'm in Ottawa Sunday through Thursday," she said. "Most weeks, I know. Fridays and Saturdays I'm usually here." "I know that too," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. The controlled expression was gone. She looked tired, and like someone who had held something very heavy for a very long time and didn't know what her arms were supposed to do now. "Is there any chance," she said carefully, "that you'd want to have dinner on a Friday?" "Not as." She stopped. "Just dinner." "Yeah," I said. "There is." The second elevator opened. She stepped in, turned around to face me. "I'll text you," she said. "I'll be under someone's floor," I said, "but I'll see it." The doors closed. I stood there for a minute, looking at the city through the glass. The mountain, the gray sky, the streets below, where people were moving in the cold the way they always do in December, quickly, with purpose, heads down. I thought about what Rosalind had said at the end of that dinner in Westmount. She'd walked us to the door and she'd taken Willa's hand and she'd said, low enough that Jeffrey probably didn't hear, "He told the truth the whole night." I watched for it. "That's rarer than you think, sweetheart." Willa had said. I know. I hadn't mentioned to either of them that I'd heard. 3 months later, she chose a ring, not because of any clause, not because of any timeline. She came into my shop on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of cold February Tuesday that makes Montreal feel like the surface of something uninhabitable, and she put a small jewelry box on my workbench and said, "I want your opinion." It was simple. White gold, small stone, nothing that would snag on anything. "I like it," I said. It's not a gesture," she said carefully. "It's not me assuming." I wiped my hands on a rag and looked at her. "Willa," I said. "Yes, I know what it is." She looked at me. February light through a dirty window, tool chests along the wall, Juno asleep in the corner on a piece of moving blanket that had become, over 4 months, entirely his. "Okay," she said. I held out my hand. She put hers in it. We stood like that for a minute. No contracts, no clause, no 14th-floor boardroom. Just a plumber and a lawyer in a shop in Verdun on a February afternoon, figuring out what telling the truth at a slightly different angle actually means when you've got nowhere else to be. Juno raised his head, looked at us, and went back to sleep. That felt about right.